Let's go.
Come on. By sheer volume of the church hurt stories that we are all familiar with.
Yes.
It's safe to say that maybe the level of maturity that's being cultivated in the church at large isn't quite through discipleship.
Wow.
The power in hurt, in church hurt in particular, but in any hurt, is not in what hurts you, it's in who hurts you.
Yeah.
So the church is about people gathering, sure, but it's second to Jesus.
Yes.
The minute any conversation regarding church becomes cynical, it's unproductive. There's an opportune time for us as the church to not just look at people that have deconstructed their faith or walked away from their faith as like the issue was with them. Because what we're saying is that we're blaming the people that we're called to lead and disciple for the reason we can't lead and disciple them. I don't know how you could get a more dysfunctional view. Are people walking away from Jesus? Or are they walking away from the way a church or an organization has tried to represent Jesus?
Come on.
So we have to make it less about us and the intricacies of our feelings and emotions, which should be subject to discipleship.
Yeah.
The process that we've already been given in Jesus, and fix our eyes on the author and the perfecter of our faith.
Everybody, and welcome to the In Sync Frequencies podcast. I am your host, Steve Rutus van Lennep, with the long surname again, and we are here to grow, here to share, and I am so excited for season 2. I cannot believe it is season 2, episode 1, and we have a special guest on the podcast, and his name is, I wish I had a drum roll. I don't actually have a drum roll, but it's,
there we go.
Well, there we go. But can we please welcome Lyle to the podcast, everybody?
Come on.
There we go.
Let's go. Jeez, my name's definitely not as long as yours.
Yeah, sorry. Mine's like back in Shakespearean times.
Yeah, but that's okay.
It's all good. It's all part of the experience. But guys, welcome to the first episode of season 2. Lyle, the one and only, is joining us. I'm very excited for this podcast, this episode. Lyle, welcome to the podcast.
Steve, thanks, man. It's such a privilege to be here, man. I'm so excited. And also just, so encouraged by what you've been doing through the podcast, man. It's been absolutely incredible and inspiring to me personally. So it just feels like a privilege to be here. So thanks for having me.
Come on, let's go. So guys, for those of you who don't know, we're going to do a proper intro and hear about Lyle's life and what he does, what he has done, and what God is leading him in doing now. But sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 1 of season 2. Let's go.
Come on.
Okay. The amount of times, I think we should just put the duck in so that Harvey and Luke will be so stoked to see.
Honestly, they love watching your podcast for the quack.
For the quack.
100%.
No other reason. They actually don't care who's on it. As long as they see the quack, that's what they want.
Come on.
Okay, cool. So, as always, we start off with unpopular opinion. But before we do that, Lyle, people are probably wondering, who have been following the podcast so far, who you are, what you do, what you're about. And before we get into the deeper part of those questions, can you just give them a rough little run through of who's Lyle and what does he do?
100%. So yeah, I'm from a small town originally on the south coast called Skopje. I was on ministry, on a ministry team down there, pastoring for, I think it was like 13 years. But absolutely love the church, completely devoted to it. I'm married to the most beautiful girl in the world, right?
Come on.
Okay. And I've got 2 little champions named Luke and Harvey. And
they're legends, just by the way.
Yeah, they are.
I get to see them every Sunday.
Yeah. I can't wait for people who make comments about my kids to actually who don't have kids to have kids.
Right, yeah. So I'm going to be one of those people. I buy the t-shirt right now.
No,
but I'm listening. Any notes I'll be taking down throughout this episode.
That's like a In Sync Frequencies kind of parenting podcast.
Yeah, 100%. You can be part 2. We had my mother on for part 1.
Ah, there we go.
You can be part of part 2.
Well, yeah. I don't think I would be able to keep up with Auntie Debbie and Auntie Vaughn.
But it's fine. Maybe your wife can join you next time and you guys can.
That's a good
That'll
idea.
be cool. I'll just join you guys, overseas. And Sorry, but carry on. Go for it.
No, so that's me. I've been involved in several different spheres. More recently, been involved in business, which has been a cool journey, a season for us as a family, and I think definitely been a catalyst for further growth in my faith and my journey in following Jesus. And that's pretty much who I am in a nutshell for now.
Let's go. We're going to get more into that a little just now. But to get started, we have the unpopular opinion segment.
There we go.
So please feel free to elaborate as much as you want to say why you agree or why you disagree. And some people are either going to be very much for or against. But at the end of the day, it's evoking thoughts. So
cool.
Let's do it. So the first one is, not every church service is for everyone, and that's okay.
I think I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think I'd agree.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great talk. Okay, so I think most people who say that is, some people would be like very bothered by that, and I don't know what your take would be on that, and why do you say you agree with that statement?
Yeah, well, I think, Steve, we culturally, it's like we're so used to options, right?
Right. Okay.
And we love options, because essentially the more options we have, the greater the potential of me finding something that appeals to me. And I think that I think it's a statement that's true of our current reality, especially in the church space, because there's so many times, even as a pastor, you'll get people that'll be brutally honest, right? They'll say, "I love coming to your church, but." The
but is very soon after.
The worship's too crazy, or the sound is too loud for me, or I don't like the way you preach or look.
Have you had that?
You get all sorts of strange things, but yeah. So I think that statement is true culturally, but do I think it's the right way to? What would I edit that out? Do I think it's
the right way?
The right
yes,
way.
I cannot confirm with that. No, just kidding.
The water boy. But do I think it's the right position to hold? Probably not. But I think, is it true of our culture today, and the way people view church and a church that they tend to and commit to? Yeah, I think so.
Very true.
But that's just probably from my own experience.
Yeah. No, I think I'm just double checking the statement here. Not every church service is for everyone, and that's okay. Yeah, I think that's good. I think as soon as you try and make like every church service one way, then you miss out on the multiple flavors that God has in terms of like the expression of His local church. And I quite enjoy visiting another church.
Yeah.
And experiencing a different aspect of the kingdom. And I think the moment you try and cookie cut every service, you miss out on what we've spoken about as a church for so long, which is the multiple giftings that a church has. Yeah, so totally. I also agree with that. I
mean, I think just to add to that, I mean, like, it's the beauty of the diversity of the church. It's every tribe, every tongue. Culturally, from an ethnic point of view, there's going to be elements of an expression of praise and a worship service that are going to appeal to more than others. And I noticed that when I was in America, and you probably did too, to some degree.
Talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, is that, so what they found is like in America, there's a strong immigrant culture, right? It's a melting pot. So you've got such a diversity of roles, a diversity of people and ethnicities, all in within the same communities, right? Some more so might have a stronger demographic than others.
Yeah.
But like what was quite interesting to see, and what I was told, is how that diversity and cultural relevance plays out in the church world. So what they found is like first generation immigrants into the country would have an insular approach to church. So they would essentially look for, like, if they came from a Latin American background, Spanish speaking background, or a Slavic background, Ukrainian, like Eastern European, African, whatever it was, or whatever, another place in Europe or Middle East, is the first generation immigrants would often build communities, and even look for church communities around their culture.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So they would look for like Slavic speaking churches, or like churches that they could relate to, where they would catch a service in their language. But what's interesting is that you have first generation immigrant, the very next generation, like their kids, would be completely assimilated. So they would go into churches that would be multicultural. So within within a generation, you would see how there's a shift that happens. So
why would you say, like, why do you think that change is so radical, literally from one generation to the next?
Well, it's probably just an exposure thing, because I think you probably find for first generation immigrants, there's a strong desire to hold on to your culture. And to keep that alive, because you've stepped into a country that's unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And just because someone moves nations, it doesn't mean they resent their culture or they hate those things about them. So I think there's probably more of an effort to try and preserve that. But I think also worship or fellowship in a church that they can understand, whether it's a language thing or a culture that feels safe or familiar. Whereas, their kids probably go to schools and colleges that are more diverse.
Yeah.
So they're exposed to different schools of thought, different cultures, and as a result, I think start to assimilate to what would be more considered to be American.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thought, because I mean, even with the statement like that obviously implies that the church is global. That it's okay to have different services, but I find it quite fascinating, because immigrating is quite a big process, and how the parents will be holding on to culture, but I'm pretty sure those children want to fit into the society that they're currently being brought up in.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would be okay with a very different take on, in terms of like a cultural approach. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, towards church, or like a different flavored form of church. So that makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting, because I didn't actually know that.
100%. So I think like you're saying, it's a popular or unpopular opinion.
Yeah.
But I think it's just framing it. You can look at that question or that statement from so many
different angles.
Yeah,
I just enjoyed the route you took, because I was very invested in that. So we're going to go into our next one.
Yeah.
Next unpopular opinion is, some people use God told me as a spiritual excuse for bad decisions.
Sure.
Agree or disagree? It's quite a radical one.
Have you experienced that before? Yeah.
I was going to say, do we make personal reference or?
Yeah. But I think if you use, if you're using the statement because God said or God told me, the reality is you better not have an excuse. So that's how I would look at that. But yeah, I think, look, Steve, this people do a lot of things in the name of faith and being a Christian and having a relationship with Him. I think as a means to maybe validate what they're feeling, and subconsciously not even knowing that that's what they're trying to do.
Wow.
But I think that's again, which is probably a different a rabbit trail from that conversation, is just around our processes that we adopt as a church for spiritual growth and maturity, right?
Yeah.
So how do I know when God's speaking to me and God has said something? And also, what does that look like when I communicate it? Because it's like, not everything God tells you is something that you have to share. Or at least that's what I've found.
Yeah.
I relate to like Joseph's story completely, because he gets this vision and this download from God, and he goes to his brothers and said, well, guys, you're going to kind of bow down to me. So that's what he saw in the vision.
Yes.
But it was only part of the fulfillment and what the intention. He didn't understand the intention or what the fulfillment of that vision that God gave him would look like.
Right.
So sometimes it's just a timing thing. So I mean, I would say that happens a lot.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Do I think it's I would be reluctant to use those words. But
Agreed.
But I think what I've come to learn is when God speaks to you, I think it's a lot of the time it's like a working out thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, God, if you're saying this, like, I want to see the outworking of it in my life and confirm it. I want to see it and understand some kind of context for this in your word, and then like share it with people that I can be accountable to. So, but yeah, unfortunately, it happens a lot.
It does happen sometimes. And it definitely does happen sometimes. And I think that's where it can lead into part of the conversation for later, which is like the church of what maybe that statement has been used for in the past in the name of wanting to like solidify certain approaches from a specific individual.
Come on.
It's just the truth, and even though it's in the name of God, it doesn't have the fruit of God,
Totally.
which is what you were just saying. But in terms of journey, because that's true, you made reference to that as well. It's a journey people are on, trying to really figure out the voice of God, and if it's a now moment, or like the reference to Joseph, is it down the line? And speaking of down the line, I did want to ask you this question as we dive into the body part, the meatier part of the podcast. We're gonna ease into it, but we'll start light and slowly get a little further in. But if you had to describe, so you mentioned you're a pastor, you've been in corporate, you've had your own business, you are about to go overseas, you just got your visa today, praise God, that's a miracle. It's incredible. For those of you who are not South African, that is a miracle. And with that being said, grew up in the South Coast, Scottsboro, happily married, 2 kids, loving the season that God's got you in. Not saying it's not daunting and all of that. I'm sure you can elaborate on that. But if you had to kind of give a word for each season in your life up until now, so I'm kind of thinking childhood, preteen, teen, in hindsight, it can be a phrase, doesn't have to be a word, but if you had to like highlight 5 to 7 seasons roughly, if you are able to kind of put that together, we would love to hear the progression of that to where you are now.
100%. So for me, it's really summed up in discipleship, and the words I'm about to use now, I think, are I think reflect that process to a degree. It's in terms of how I see my growth and my development. But I think I would say through the different seasons in life, through roles, functions that I've been in, and as I've grown up, and because I didn't grow up in a Christian home either, so I got saved in my teens.
Wow.
And then kind of stepped into the church world. And I say the church world, I'm just talking about everything that's familiar with being part of a local church community, and which was a great source of healing for me. But I would say words that really define my life and the seasons that I've been through is really the process of learning and unlearning.
Wow.
So I feel like those have been crucial elements to my growth and development and my ability to continue to grow in each season.
Okay.
And by that I'm not talking about growing in influence and approval as a result of functions and roles, but really who Lyle is as a person, right?
I love that.
So because I think growth in systems and structures, it might help me to be better, to function within systems and structures. But as I grow in my understanding, my identity, and who God has created me to be, the one who really benefits first from that is me and my family.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, the functions and roles. But I think it's always started with, firstly, unlearning.
Yeah, maybe touch on that, because when people hear learning and then they hear unlearning, they don't know how to associate that to growth. Maybe you could just elaborate on that.
Totally. So I mean, one of the best ways I can describe it is like, so I'm a musician, so I play drums and a couple other things, but a large part of growing in being proficient in music or playing an instrument is unlearning bad habits. And so I was self-taught in some of these things for a long time. And the truth is, in every area of life, we seek to grow and develop in our careers and in our roles in church and all of these things. And if we don't have coaching, we don't have discipleship, we don't have someone in close proximity to help us see the bad habits that we've picked up along the way, not because there's necessarily anything wrong with you, but the truth is conditions in life are never perfect. And poor conditions, even with the best of intentions, have an impact on your growth. So it's almost like you think of some plants and trees, right? So sometimes you see a tree or a plant growing at a specific angle, and you're like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. Why did that happen? Well, it turns out like it grew that way because there was certain elements inhibiting its ability to get sunlight. So it grows in the direction of the sunlight. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Or whatever it is, there's these various adaptations, and not all of them are necessarily good. So,
Got you.
so if we're left to our own devices through the
Yes.
seasons of life, not subject to discipleship, mentorship,
Mm.
we pick up bad habits whether we like it or not.
Come on.
And so that's why I'm saying for me, what I've learned in my process is the different seasons of life is being okay with unlearning. Firstly, recognizing and having the input to see I've got some bad habits.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of the world and the life that we live.
That we live, yeah.
We develop bad habits.
Mm.
But I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
So until I recognize, and God can do that through circumstances, as much as we hate to acknowledge it, God uses circumstances.
He does.
He can expose it, but Jesus gave us a perfect model in discipleship to expose these things and to have people come alongside us and us come alongside others where we can really recognize the bad habits, unlearn them, recognize that they're there, systematically take them apart, take them down, and this is a buzzword, deconstruct them, and then start to learn the right habits.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying? Because the truth is many people deal with bad habits, and I actually shared a word once entitled unlearned behavior. And that's referring to in the book of Acts when you've got some of the apostles standing before the Sanhedrin being like, criticized for their stance.
Yeah.
And then the comment made about them is when they saw that these were unschooled, ordinary men or unlearned. It
So
means
true.
they hadn't been conditioned by a system, the culture,
Yeah.
to the degree that was impacting their ability to reflect Jesus. Or affect like the culture that was the accepted norm, which is many things Jesus stood against.
Yeah.
So all came to right.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just it's constantly staying in that position of like I don't know it all. I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. I'm here to be teachable.
Yeah.
And in those moments, I've just seen how God can do more in a moment of that, acknowledging those things.
Yeah,
than in a
absolutely.
lifetime of reading the best
Oh.
self-help books and books on how to and not to.
It's
kind
true.
Of stuff. So
And sorry, I'm just grabbing out this to double check, but I think you touched on such a good point. So, like, in terms of the seasons, would you say that it's just been a real thing of learning and unlearning through each season, and in that process, I mean, you mentioned discipleship quite a bit. Like discipleship, your buzzword, deconstruct. You'll know why at the end.
there we go.
But tapping into discipleship, you've mentioned that a lot. Did you have that when you first kind of came to knowing Jesus as your Lord and Savior and giving your life to Him before you stepped into that pastoral role? And how has your view shifted from what you thought it was to what you now see it to be?
Yeah. So definitely, Steve, like I can honestly, looking back on my life, see how God has always brought people, mentors, examples into my life to teach me and to refine me and to keep me in this place of recognizing my need to learn and unlearn. Right. So I think that's something I've always been incredibly grateful for. And when I say people and brought them in as an example, sometimes there's people in your life and they're there to show you how not to do it. Tell you,
no, that's
but
such a good point.
Just by virtue of observation, like I just know that God has put me in spaces and places where I'm like, what the flip am I doing here? And I look back on it now and I realize how those moments were so equipping and how they empowered me to hold to the conviction that God has prepared the soil of my heart for.
Sure.
So had I not gone through those things or even had those relationships and those people in my life where many of them were just seasonal,
yes,
I don't think I would have the perspective that I do right now.
Right.
And so I think even the value of discipleship for me, which is so centric to who I am, because in my opinion, that's the only way Jesus gave us on how to do this thing.
Yes, and before you go any further, can you touch on that? Like, why do you say that is something that Jesus demonstrated for us in the Word? Like, can you kind of extrapolate that?
Yeah, totally. So I think it's like what we see in Jesus's model of discipleship is the creation of this proximity to the people that he's leading and discipling, right?
Yes.
So the beauty of it is that it's close, it's real, and it's raw. And we live in a culture, even within the Christian, or let me say, we live in a world, even the church space, where we have tried to, give the church and people this expression of a culturally relevant Jesus.
Sure.
Okay, and so when we read the Bible, because I mean, biblical literacy is a huge challenge even within the church. So from church leaders,
no, absolutely,
and preachers to people in our congregations.
If I'm not mistaken, I heard a stat. Apparently, only 8% of Christians in churches legitimately read their Bibles. This is, I think, it was a U.S. study.
Yeah.
I'd
The
have
Americans
to
love
triple check.
stats.
Yeah. No, they do.
We're grateful for that, America.
we are
Keep 'em
very
going.
grateful, but I also don't want to not speak truth. But I think that was the study that was mentioned. So tying into what you're saying, just biblical literacy.
No, totally. And so that's such a dangerous thing. And I mean, we can talk about that later, because again, that's something that's so really important to me, and fueling behind a bit of a fuel behind like the project that I'm part of right now.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that people they get this expression of Jesus that doesn't seem real. And that's what discipleship does. Discipleship is and it like, in terms of the gospel and the model that Jesus has given to us, what you can't read and witness what Jesus did and demonstrated in the scripture and not see it as something that's applicable to you right here, right now.
Yeah.
It's not about cultural relevance.
Come on.
Anyone can look at it and see the value of the proximity that Jesus created.
Come on.
As with all the authority at his disposal, yet exposing this humility to be able to bridge the gap between people that society had written off. And said, well, you're not, you didn't meet the requirements to study Torah or to be a theological religious leader in the day. But I think if you look at this, the power of discipleship in terms of the model that Jesus gave us is the proximity. And what they did, they celebrated together.
Yes.
They cried together.
Yeah.
They were persecuted together. They had these moments where they saw Jesus do these incredible miracles, and there was a celebration. There was like, what did we just witness?
Wow.
And that all those opportunities simply created by the proximity.
Yeah.
That Jesus invited these 12 guys, and then there was a kind of knock-on effect of other disciples and people that were part of the journey and witnessed the ministry of Jesus at different times. But there was this core group of people that Jesus uses to establish this model that works.
Yeah.
It works.
And we're the evidence of it working.
100%. 100%. And so anyway, so for me, I just feel like God, that captured my attention from the moment I started reading the Bible, is how Jesus treated and responded to people.
Come on.
Because I think so much of the deviations from his design and the things the clever slogans and phrases we've tried to come up to make discipleship sexy.
Yeah.
We would see the irrelevance of them to Jesus, because he gave us a model that works. We don't need to make it something that it's not.
Yes.
So my passion for discipleship came from a deficit of it.
Wow. Yeah, talk about it. That's such a good point.
So, and I praise, like, I'm so grateful for that, because I realize so many people leave church and give up on Jesus.
Yeah.
Because of that deficit.
Yeah, it's a very real thing.
It's always been something that I've just, like, if it's there and it worked, then why wouldn't it work for me, and why wouldn't I want it?
Yeah, so it's powerful, because I never really used to think about it in the context of discipleship. I used to think of it in the context of like a mentor, which is discipleship. It is discipleship, but obviously discipleship's far more intimate and through everything, not just time periods and then cool, see you. It's like, no, I'm with you through thick and thin.
100%.
And I'm here to deliver truth when you don't want it, and I'm here to deliver truth when you do want it.
Totally.
And it's life. It's in the entirety of life. But I would always think, I mean, to be honest, I did have people who would say, hey, I would love to be your mentor, but I just don't think they knew how to mentor. So I was kind of going, okay, cool. Now what? You know, it's kind of like that scene in Finding Nemo when they leave the fish tank, and it's like
100%.
Now what?
So being a person that can disciple is directly determined by your ability to become a disciple.
Yeah.
That's how it works. It's a model that is replicable.
Come on.
So Jesus made it in a way where it would be easy to replicate. That's to the point where, like, that's the power of it. He said,
Yes.
as you've seen me do it,
Go and
go in. Do you see what I'm
Wow.
saying? So it's and that's the thing. Proximity. If there's no proximity and the ability to witness, because think
it's
about
not
it.
happening.
I mean, these guys got to see how Jesus responded to different circumstances and situations.
Yeah.
They got to see his righteous indignation in the temple, and they were like, "Wow, okay, that's new."
Yeah,
Okay, but they got to see it. They had a front row ticket to it.
Wow.
They got to see Jesus weep, like, and his burden and his heart for people and the state of Israel and how far they had deviated from his design. So it's like all of these things. If anything, if there was a word, it's discipleship is organic. It's not a system and a process that you can quantify through even numbers.
Yes.
Or like, it's something. Even you start to see the change in the people that you are discipling because you're close to them.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and that's the thing. We don't really see the fruit of discipleship because I think we don't emphasize its ability or the need for it to be a multiplication.
Yes. Yeah.
Something that is replicated. So as you've seen me do it, you do it.
Go and do
you
it.
do unto others.
So
you know what
powerful.
I mean? So it's easy.
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is especially with the church, we are on, and I'm saying this as a pastor who loves the church. So
Absolutely.
there's no criticism.
Just to clarify,
of the
yes.
100% is like as the church, we are faced with a society that's full of complex problems.
Yeah.
And we're looking for complex solutions to complex problems. When the solution to complexity is simplicity.
Absolutely.
And discipleship, it hits all of those like markers.
Every marker.
So it's like, and that's the thing is a challenge to us, Steve, as leaders is like, and your experience is like, Stephen, I feel like I'm called to mentor you, and then like, okay, but do you know what that means? Like
100%.
so-
Or you say yes, and you just don't see each other for 6 months, and then you get reprimanded, and you're like, you weren't walking with me at all. I don't get it.
No, totally. Yeah. But like the thing is it's like you're only going to be as strong a leader as you are discipled.
Come on.
That's it. It's
That's
that
the
simple.
truth. Yeah.
And a discipleship is not to make carbon copies of the person that's discipling you.
I'm so glad you said that.
It's about through that process of learning and growing and iron sharpening iron and walking together through different seasons in the trenches, navigating through life, that people observe you, they can see how you react and draw something from it. I mean, because the truth in discipleship, and I'm now again, I'm not talking about necessarily Jesus, because all have sinned and fallen short of glory.
Yes, absolutely.
But except him.
Yeah. He's the perfect one.
So we're never going to
Absolutely.
be perfect as we disciple people.
Right.
But the truth is, if there's close enough proximity to people that we are discipling, they're going to learn from your weaknesses and your strengths.
Yes.
And if you,
Yes.
as a leader and as someone who is just committed to discipling people, are okay with that, you are setting the people you're discipling up to win.
It's so good. It's so good. One of the examples, or not examples, but real life situations that I can relate to what you're saying right now is it's one of my cousins. I got a lot of cousins, so we'll just keep it like that. But one of them were telling me, they were saying that one of the things they wish they had seen a bit more growing up is functional conflict.
Yeah.
In the form of marriage and at home.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, in the family we had a divorce, and the perception was there's no fighting, so everything's grand, it's good,
Wow.
it's fun,
Yeah.
we're thriving, the cousin's family around, and then all of a sudden, boom, like divorce, ugly divorce, long divorce.
Wow.
And basically,
Yeah.
like my cousin and I were just connecting on a heart-to-heart level, and they were saying, I wish I had seen an example of what functional conflict looks like to help me have functional conflict in
Yeah,
what
man.
I'm going to have in marriage one day.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they're happily married, and they're paving the way in their own, in the next generation of their family,
So good.
and in their journey with the Lord. But I just think of what you're saying, how the disciples saw Jesus weep. They saw him get frustrated and flip tables, but they saw the righteous, holy way of doing it, and not just that human, reactive, in your face, like, I'm going to prove you wrong, rather than show you the righteous way in handling, like, moving forward. And I think that's such a powerful thing. I really look up to Jesus first and foremost.
He's kind of a cool guy.
Kind of a cool guy, yeah. Kind of saved our lives, my life. Don't know about.
Yeah.
But one thing that I were laughing about it actually at a synergy. I think it was a synergy meeting, the youth gathering.
Yeah.
With different local leaders in the area. I think there was young adults, one of the two.
Yeah.
And I just said to them, one of the first things that I tell people when walking with them, because when you're in a church and you're in a pastoral kind of role and serving the church, there's always going to be like those encounters you have with people like, will you be my mentor? And which is amazing. It's great, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think in that setting, you're going, I'm going to just point you to Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm following him. He's my mentor. So I'm going to let you know right now in my humanity, at some point I am going to let you down. Like, you can ask that guy right there, Hayden. The first thing I said to him, he said, bro, can you be my mentor or whatever? And I said, well, I think mentorship is just, the best mentorship is just friendship, which ultimately leads to discipleship.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm just going to let you know, off the bat, I'm going to let you down. And he was like, what do you, he was like, what do you mean you're going to let me down?
Still hasn't happened yet, hey. Still waiting for that.
Well, he's still here. So.
This guy's perfect, so yeah.
He just gets up and leaves.
Yeah. Please don't go.
Just do the dance as you're going, yeah. But that was one of our first conversations, because what I realized is I had that expectation of the mentors who said they wanted to mentor me, that they would be the Jesus in my life in the context of mentorship. Yeah. And I would put a God standard on a human being instead of seeing the God in the human being and following the God standard, man. You know. But linking it back to church hurt, do you think that when it comes to discipleship, or maybe the lack of discipleship, that has been one of the primary reasons that people don't want to come back to church? Because I was doing some research beforehand, shout out to ChatGPT, and just saying, like, what is the number one reason people do not come back to church or to engaging in their faith again?
Yeah.
And it's people. It's the fact that they said they weren't discipled. Nobody saw them or walked with them. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on that, especially as someone who was in youth ministry. And you
still got some scars,
rough
man.
and tough, you know.
Still got some scars from youth ministry.
I'm fine. But in that regard, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think about that, but also maybe in how us being salt and light, we can improve from that space into moving forward around that kind of idea.
No, totally. You look, I think there's a couple angles.
Yeah, go for it, whatever angle.
But I think, at least from my perspective, I think I've got to say this the right way.
Feel free. Sorry.
but the reality is, like I said, people are not perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said it yourself, especially in like a mentorship, discipleship kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Is that, you're going to be let down.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And like, I think the thing is that perhaps the kind of things that we teach and the cultures that we adopt within church set people up to have unrealistic expectations.
Come on,
because,
that's so good.
Because the truth is, like, even from like an organizational point, so let's talk organizational church, right?
Go for it.
Is the organization is not what hurts you, right? And we can punt that so well. So we can present an organization or a church organization with flawless values, fantastic vision, that captures attention and really makes people want to be there, right? And that's good. Those things are healthy. So it's not that they're bad.
Yes.
But the reality is people commit to that. But, and that's enough to get them in the door. But what keeps them there is relationship.
Come on.
Does that make sense? So,
yes.
And I mean, have you even seen that? We've been part of a church that has incredible. We have worship has always been a strength.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
the mandate as part of our church has been to pioneer something in worship, which has been such an incredible privilege to be part of.
Yeah.
But the thing is that like again, the pursuit of cultural relevance has created an appetite for a specific kind of church. And so it comes from invite culture. It's get as many people in the room as we can. And so we get all the people in the room, and that becomes even our metric for success and how well we're doing. When in actual fact, that stuff doesn't give you any indication into how the spiritual health and growth of your people. Yeah. So the reality is, I think the more, and this is where the church hurt dynamic comes. And the more we mature and we follow Jesus and we embrace the process of discipleship, I think the more resilient we become to church hurt. So I think by sheer volume of the church hurt stories that we are all familiar with, it's safe to say that maybe the level of maturity that's being cultivated in the church at large isn't quite through discipleship. Wow. Isn't quite where it needs to be.
Would you say that's maybe due to the fact that it's been done through concept rather?
Yeah, absolutely, as opposed to practice.
Yes,
no, exactly, 100%. Because that's the thing, is discipleship does not and cannot work. It cannot have any authority if it's simply a principle without practice. So that's it. Practice changes everything.
I hope you're taking notes.
Practice changes everything. And that's, again, is the simplicity in the model of discipleship. Is Jesus modeled something and said, now you go and do. You know, it's the invitation to recognize the privilege we have of observing, like the disciples had, of observing Jesus. But then all of a sudden they were hit with the responsibility of being like Jesus. Wow. And through what they had observed.
And that's a whole other level.
100%. But what you referred to earlier was so good, because Paul said this. It's like, follow me as I follow Christ. You know what I mean? So I'm not. What he's saying there is, I'm not trying to make you disciples and replicas of me.
Yes.
It's the pursuit that I have, the conviction that I have of being more like Jesus and being devoted to follow Jesus that will serve you better than I ever can. If that's one thing I can leave with you, if that's one thing I can impart to you, it's to follow Jesus. Yeah. So because he does the rest.
Come on.
You know, he does the work within us. He develops the character. And this is another thing, even within church hurt spaces, right? Is that sometimes there's just been a lot of expectations put on people that they're not ready for.
Yeah, talk about it. That's so true.
So as a result, they are overwhelmed by the responsibility or the function that they're given. Yeah. And they might even feel like they're failing, not because they can't fulfill it, but because just right now, there's maybe a discipleship deficit. Yeah. There's still some proximity to that they need to learn and to grow in that will empower them to function in those places in a healthy way and deal with relationships in a healthy way. Because the thing is, church, like, we're all about people. Yeah. Okay, so we love to say those things, and it's true, we are. That as a fivefold ministry, different gifts, we're there to pastor, raise, equip, and empower people 100%. Yeah. But the truth is, we are the body that is an expression of Jesus. Yeah. So the church is about people gathering, sure, but it's second to Jesus. Yes. The reason we're in this community, the reason we're all part of this thing, is because of Jesus. Yeah. So we have to make it less about us and the intricacies of our feelings and emotions, which should be subject to discipleship. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The process that we've already been given in Jesus, and fix our eyes on the author and the perfecter of our faith. Yeah. Right. So I'm trying. Hopefully people don't hear what I'm not saying.
I'm hearing what you're saying.
There's so many dynamics to it, but I'm just saying, like, there's just some culturally, organizationally relevant things that we've implemented
within church spaces,
that aren't necessarily serving to get the people to a place of maturity. And that was Paul's prayer, right? Paul was like, that I would present you before Christ mature, fully assured in all the will of God. You know, then he writes to another church, basically. I mean, I love this. Someone said, I can't remember who it was, but if Paul was alive on earth today, the church would be getting a letter.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 110%.
So anyway, what that letter would look like, interesting. But but the truth is, he's like, he's saying to this church, you guys are still on milk. Yeah. By now, you should be on solid food. Do you know what I mean? Speaking of his desire to see the church mature.
Yeah.
And I think in our simplicity, in that simplicity is the solution to so many of these church hurt issues.
Yes.
Is like the emphasis of people growing and maturing in their faith through proximity, not through systems and structures.
Yeah.
Because systems and structures are great at running organizations, but they suck at discipling people. They don't disciple people.
Right.
People
right.
disciple people.
Yes. Yes.
Disciples disciple people. Let me say that.
Yes. Yes.
So I just think I've gone down a huge rabbit trail.
No, but it's very
makes
good.
sense.
It related to the church hurt. And do you think that from a us hurting them perspective, it's due to concept and not practice?
Yeah, yeah.
And then how with worship, you're saying like we've been gifted in worship, and then the invite culture, and it's so powerful and so good. And
but let me add this. If
yeah,
I can,
go for it.
Steve,
Go for it.
Is which I think maybe will be something that helps throw a bit more meat on the bones.
Yeah.
Said,
We're adding more paint to the canvas.
Yeah, so people know I'm not being critical. I'm not trying to be cynical here at all. It's not my heart. Because I think the minute any conversation regarding church becomes cynical, it's unproductive.
Yes.
Because God's not going to bless that conversation or that
so
spirit.
Good.
But I think what is important is for us to embrace simplicity and keep that posture of simplicity, because especially as it pertains to relationships, because relationships, biblically, we've got enough examples, are either our greatest asset or our greatest downfall.
Absolutely.
Relationships. And so and this is the thing, the power in hurt, in church hurt in particular, but in any hurt, is not in what hurts you, it's in who hurts you.
Yes. Yeah, it's not in what hurts you, it's in who hurts you.
So you think of the life of David, okay? David's own father forgot about him. Oh, wait, I do actually have another son.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then it becomes...
And he's serving his father as
100%.
well.
100%. He's out there, dude. It's like, I'm looking after the sheep
after
for
your
you.
sheep.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, come on, at least cut me a little bit of slack here and some street credit.
Than
Yeah, 100%. But and then it's his leader. It's Saul.
Yes.
The very guy who has the potential to be a leadership mentor to him is the oak who's throwing spears at him.
Yeah.
Right?
While he's playing music for him.
100%. It's like, dude, I'm trying to help you. I mean, you
Yeah.
got this little like demonic thing happening here.
Yes.
Play my instrument, and
Yes.
it'd be interesting to hear what that melody
Yeah,
was
I'm
like.
wondering.
It's
It's like
I don't know, maybe held the harp like a guitar and just like shredded that thing. I don't know, but the truth is, and then he goes on, and then it's his peer through Jonathan. That was an interesting dynamic. There's so many theological different views and perspectives on that relationship. But then it's his own son who kicks him out of his own kingdom.
Yeah.
And so you see, it's like, so David, I mean, had a lot relationally working against him. But the thing that trumped all of those things is the fact that he was a friend of God.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's like he was a man after God's heart. And that's what I've like kind of learned, is that in the deficits of my life, okay,
Yes.
and the lacks, the things that I haven't experienced, like God has always been so faithful in affirming me.
Yeah.
You know, in little things. I remember being new in ministry.
Yeah.
And driving home one day, and I was like, when I say new, I was in ministry for a few years, but relatively new. You know, working hard, striving, trying to do everything that I could to serve the church and display my commitment to Jesus and the church through running myself into the flipping ground. You know, I was
Relate.
yeah, I was driving home, and I just started bawling in my car.
Wow.
And I was like, why? Like, what's going on? I just didn't know why I felt the way that I felt.
Yeah,
and then there was this deep cry in my heart that came out in a prayer, and it was, all I want, Lord, is for someone to tell me that they're proud of me and I'm doing a good job.
Jeez.
Like, that was at the core of something that was happening in my life at that time.
Yeah.
And God was bringing this need for affirmation, because I also struggled a lot with intimidation.
Right.
I would be very intimidated, and so I would always put myself underneath and always feel like, geez, you know, what do I have? Value do I add? So my response to that was to try and work and strive.
Yeah.
And that obviously resulted in even me relating to God in an unhealthy way. But obviously that's not what that's a conversation for another day. But I remember just like driving, obviously with my eyes. You
Yeah. Jesus, take the wheel, but I'll keep one eye on the road.
But it was at night. Actually can remember the stretch like so clearly of road that I was on, and I just remember like the Holy Spirit just saying to me, "My boy, I'm so proud of you." And in that moment, something broke off my life, where that desire to receive the affirmation of man, and for someone to tell me I was doing good, to validate my function and role, was broken off me.
Wow!
In one moment.
Come on.
And then there's been later times in my life, Steve, where I've had mentors that have come in and I've needed that, and they've cheered me on, and they've been that voice. But God has been so faithful in all those different seasons of life to basically cultivate and mature me in those areas for myself, so that I relate to others in a healthy way.
Yeah,
that's what discipleship produces. And in terms of church hurt, and
it's so good, because then it also says from like how and I think a lot of people relate to that deeply, of how you just want to be seen, you just want to be acknowledged. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think it's a human thing that can turn into a bad thing. Totally. But I think even affirmation, it's not a bad thing. It just depends where you're getting it from. And I know for a fact that that's going to impact a lot of people, because I highly relate as well. And I realize God is slightly different context, but I remember I didn't even realize it, but it was not I was on the more leader and people pleasing aspect of I didn't mind being misunderstood by someone who wasn't a leader, but when a leader misunderstood me, that's where I was like, oh frick, like maybe I have got it wrong, or maybe and so I started to kind of go into that same intimidation kind of space of I'm gonna have to completely rethink how I'm doing this or whatever. And the motivation was for the acknowledgement and affirmation of the leader, rather than being okay with the fact that my leader might not get the God thing that God's given 100%. Me in a completely honoring way, in a godly way, not in a my way or the highway, or forget your leadership, none of that. Just hey, this is what I really believe God's telling me to do, or whatever. And I remember God at a similar moment where he just went, you've been struggling with the leader pleasing thing. And so I don't know about you, I just broke in tears, just like sobbed my eyes
ugly
out.
Cry.
Ugly, like, like actually, you pull the car over, because
it's so good.
And
because there's windscreepers,
windscreepers.
There's windscreen wipers on the car, but not on your eyes, right?
Exactly.
And then it's like not everything's like snot proof. It's like a flying ant on the windshield. Don't use your windscreen wipers. Makes it worse.
Exactly.
But that's so good, Steve, and so true, man. But that's the process of unlearning and learning, right? So it's unlearning that behavior that keeps you in a place of looking for affirmation. And again, like, affirmation is so important.
Yes.
It is so important to be affirmed by your leaders. It is.
It's very important.
Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's such an important aspect of even discipleship. And especially as it pertains to like discipleship between guys.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of guys, we struggle, I certainly did, relate to affirmation and be okay with it in a healthy way. Do you know what I mean? Where it's taken time for me, like, so for me, a person who played such a critical role in that for me was my father-in-law.
Yes.
Because they essentially took me in. I was this jacked up, broken young guy, like completely broken. They took me in. I was an absolute wreck. I used to wake up with like night terrors, really bad night terrors, anxiety and depression, all sorts of stuff. And like my father-in-law, this is before I even married Christy, who is the most beautiful girl in the world.
Shout out Christy.
There we go. Like he would come through and sit on the end of the bed.
Wow.
And pray for me, bro. And pray for me. So like that was something it was so foreign. It was so
Wow.
different that I didn't even know how to react or
Yeah.
respond to it. But I was in such a broken place that I was just like, I think God just spiritually deposited so much in my life that's like through the example and him discipling me by observing him, like I would never know. Like honestly, I would never know what it really meant to be firstly a son, then like a husband and a father if I didn't have that example.
Yeah.
And so that's why for me, like I said, God has been so faithful in bringing people into my life to make sure that I have this, I'm unlearning these toxic things that are naturally there through our flesh and our nature. They undealt with bad habits things, you know, like
and
we spoke
even
about
stuff that like maybe our parents faced that has just been like passed
Totally.
on through. I mean,
100%.
I remember, like the Holocaust, for instance. You remember when I can't remember if you were with us when we went to the Holocaust, but when we went there and they showed us the hologram of that, it was a Jewish man.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, will he forgive the Nazis for what they did?
Yeah,
And he was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it is, I remember seeing a study shortly after that where, or it might have even been there, where it wasn't there. But basically the study goes like this. They assessed the genes of those Jews who survived the Holocaust.
Yeah.
In
the concentration camps.
In the concentration, exactly. So all the radical trauma that they went through.
Yeah.
And they assessed their genes and their DNA. And then they went 3 generations down and assessed the genes and DNA.
Yeah.
And the trauma had literally been transferred through DNA to their grandchildren.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful statements I've heard, which is from Michael Todd, not from him, but he was learning it through a counselor and therapy that they were doing. And basically they were saying to them, like, what's not transformed is transferred.
Yeah. Completely.
And so like in a good context and a bad context, you know, so he also went through just absolute brokenness. For him, it was like performance. He had to perform for the validation of man. And he didn't realize that that's something, and he would go to his father and talk about it and say, son, actually, that's something I also have struggled with. So sometimes we don't even realize what we seem to think are only our problems are quite literally from 100%. Our parents or our parents' parents. And it's amazing to hear the God-sent father, your God-sent father-in-law, to teach you like Christ, it's discipleship, but more than that, how to be a father in your own journey.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that's just the power of it. That's the power of proximity.
Yeah.
And discipleship is what you learn and grow, and how you grow through observing. And sometimes you don't actually know the degree of your dysfunction until you see the right way.
Yeah,
and
that's so good.
And I think that's healthy. There's no shame in recognizing that there's dysfunction in your life. You know, because many people will see, you know, an example of someone doing something in a way that they wish they could but feel like they haven't been able to, and they'll feel disqualified. As opposed to looking at it and reframing it in a way like that the gospel empowers us to have what Jesus said we could have. And if it's available and functioning and flowing through someone else, the same spirit, you have access to the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead now lives in you.
So
he produces the same fruit. It might be a different expression because of your unique design.
Yeah.
But if the heaven's definition of equality is not a distorted one. We all have equal opportunity.
Can you say that again? That's really good.
So heaven's definition of equality is, what did I say? I forgot.
It's not a distorted
one.
Yeah.
So again,
it's pure. It's completely true.
And the distortion is always our filters.
Yeah.
It's our dysfunction.
Dang it. Again.
Yeah. Well, it's the truth, and that's the thing, is like, I think the biggest inhibitor to our growth and development is not being able to acknowledge that.
Yeah, we think we're already there when we're not.
Yeah,
or we don't want to acknowledge that we're not, and so we don't.
Like if we can't identify the enemy that's trying to take us out, we can't defend. We can't fight back. We can't be offensive.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make this or use war analogies, but I think that the truth is that it's like not everyone has this. The ability to recognize patterns that have been passed down.
Yes.
But as a principle, that's where you see the redemptive nature of God through Jesus.
Come on.
In how we are all given the opportunity to be free from those things, right?
Yes.
So you look at many people, and I've been listening to this one YouTuber.
Yes.
That is all about deconstruction.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's the typical result. So people start to ask questions. They get a reaction to the questions that they ask.
Right.
And as a result, there's no healthy means of processing these questions and the realities of what they're going through. So their deconstruction process results in atheism, like I believe in nothing. So
Hectic.
So the challenge, and one of the things is like, how can God punish kids and children for stuff that they didn't do, right? The handing down, the reality of which we know scientifically, biologically, it happens.
Yeah.
So, but the reality is that principle was set up to bless.
Yes.
It was never to be something that causes pain and dysfunction to perpetuate itself. It was a channel of blessing.
So good.
We messed that up. We messed it up.
It's I just think in the exact same breath we always ignore the action that led to the consequence.
Totally.
When it comes to that generational kind of cursing aspect where, well, they don't deserve it. Well, what led to them deserving it?
Yeah.
The disobedience and the lack of acknowledgement of who God is in the parents' lives, or the willful choices to go against the standards that were created from God, not for us to just fulfill, but like you said earlier, it wasn't a distorted version of the best aspect of how we should live this life.
Come on.
And so they start to acknowledge all the things that kids shouldn't have, and they turn a blind eye to how it even got there in the first place,
so good,
and how
Steve.
the parents had a choice. The grandparents had a choice, the great-grandparents, they all had choices.
Yeah.
And maybe we can go into the really exciting part now, because deconstructing is a term that can be very triggering. I'd say probably the most...
I don't think very is a strong enough word, Steve.
Yeah, well, I think it's the most triggering for those who maybe are on the west side of this world.
Yeah,
like it's the most triggering.
Yeah, man.
I have to admit, I don't know if it's a good thing, but South Africans just make memes out of everything. So
100%. I think we've got a great sense of humor. We do not take ourselves too seriously.
Exactly, and which is a beautiful thing, but a not so good thing in certain situations as well.
And probably super irritating to others.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like
anyway.
Serious laughs, dang it, But going into deconstructing, for those of you who don't know, we're going to head into this part of the pod right now, which is you are officially launching your own podcast, which is super exciting. What's the name and what's it about? Like, I really want to get into this, and I would love for you feel so free to share your heart behind it, because I, as someone who's got to just be a part of the small aspect of your journey, I'm so excited for what's to come.
Yeah, no, thanks, Steve. So yeah, this like I'm trying to just keep it as simple as possible, because the name sounds so complicated, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's going to be triggering.
Yeah.
And I'm not. There we go. I didn't choose it intentionally to trigger people, but I just thought that, how do I best articulate what I feel has been years, something that God has been doing in me, and I think speaking to me about for years, that has been a matter of timing. So it's an original, like I said, about Joseph. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This idea has been something I've buried in my heart for so long, and been so reluctant to step out there for probably the large degree of that has been my own insecurity.
Right.
But I just seeing the time, that we're living in, and the conversations that are happening in the church, I've really felt like an activation in my heart to say, now's the time.
Yeah.
And so and this is where I must commend you, Steve, because, you've done such an incredible thing here, in terms of the podcast that you are doing, and I know that it's blessing and is going to continue to bless so many people. And what excites me is that I think you are part of the many voices that God is raising up for the next generation. Because sometimes you observe things in the previous generations, even the people that mentor and guide us.
Right.
And God shows you stuff, but there's wisdom in knowing what he's showing you and how to appropriate it to your generation.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Wow, that's good.
And so a lot of the stuff that I've seen and felt, and even the stuff that's been developed in me, has been through observing and the previous generations and subjecting myself to a process of discipleship.
Yes.
So that I know, God, like, whatever you call me to step into, I do it with confidence off the back of what I know you've said. You know, that it's not pursuing cultural relevance. It's not trying to build a platform around church hurt and fame for myself. But really something that I believe will bless people and serve as a catalyst for growth.
Yes.
Without being cynical.
Yeah.
So the Diary of a Deconstructing Pastor, that's the name.
Let's go. I'm really liking these hotkeys right now. I'm just throwing it out there.
It's pretty cool. I'm going to probably have to get one of those
100%. I'll help you. It's all good.
But yeah, so the Diary of a Deconstructing Pastor really is the culmination of years and years of process in God and learning and observing and growing through my own hurt, my own pain. Yeah. But I think the hurt and pain associated with my own dysfunction. And so I think God has taught me a lot, and I think that's the goal in any process of growth and development, is how you find yourself within positions and circumstances that you are able to see the eternal value in it beyond the right now. Yeah. And I really like that. And so that's what I feel like this is about. The birthing place of this idea and this project has been. So really, there's going to be a lot about it, a lot in it that I'm going to be vulnerable. Yes. There's going to be conversations about church culture, structures, systems, approaches to ministry that are going to be had with different voices from different perspectives that I think is healthy. Yes, I think it's going to be a good thing. But I think what I'm so excited about is, and this is kind of the pinnacle of it for me, is that I really believe that the church needs a response to the epidemic of deconstruction. Yeah. We're so good at reacting to things. Yes. So good. Talk about it. And in fact, there's so many YouTubers and platforms built around reacting to what's going on in the church. Absolutely. Millions of people watching reactions. It's unbelievable. And the crazy thing is, all it does is it just fuels the cynicism towards the church. Yeah. It fuels the confusion. It validates the position that people have taken that say, that's why I don't want to be part of it. Yeah. It's so good. Carry on. I need to put a mental note because I want to add to that. Yeah. So I think for me, it's like I really feel God prompting me into this project, this process of, God, how do we come up with a response to this? Yes. Because the truth is, there is so much church hurt. Yeah. There is so much. And not a reaction. Yeah, that's not a reaction. Response. It's happening. There is so much dysfunction that is being exposed, the scandals, all of that stuff that is coming out. Yeah. And the reality is, I think there's an opportune time for us as the church to not just look at people that have deconstructed their faith or walked away from their faith as like the issue was with them. Because what we're saying is that we're blaming the people that we're called to lead and disciple for the reason we can't lead and disciple them. And I mean, like, I don't know how you could get a more dysfunctional view of the call and the mandate of the church. It kind of makes sense as to how it leads to more cynicism as well, or just a complete lack of belief in the first place. 100%. So I think it's like my belief is let me just say this, it's an anchoring thought for the project. Yes. Okay, is are people walking away from Jesus? Or are they walking away from the way a church or an organization has tried to represent Jesus? Come on. Because there's a difference between the two. Huge. And the truth is, it's like if we're making people disciples of our visions for the organization,
It's earthly discipleship.
It's so easy for me to pick and choose.
I don't even want to call that discipleship.
Yeah. Well, the reality is we can disciple people. Like
Yes.
discipleship. I mean, I remember like in youth ministry, like kids would walk into youth ministry, and I was like, dude, I know exactly what music this oak's listening to.
Yeah.
I know who he's following. I know
Come
what he's
on.
liking, because the reality is becoming like the person he's following. Okay, that's the power of discipleship.
Yeah.
Because we're meant to function like that. But again, becomes distorted.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So and that's also what fuels influencer culture.
Yeah.
It's like it's fueled this celebrity pastor status mentality that other guys, young guys coming up in ministry, have looked at and say, well, that's the benchmark
That's what
for
I want
success
to. Yeah. Exactly.
in ministry. But because it's in the church, we can validate it with scripture and become so good at using the right language.
Yes.
We think it's okay. When in actual fact, it's like all we're doing is we're generating copies of people as opposed to copies of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because the reality is we're all born original, Steve, but most of us die copies.
Dang.
Because we're disciples of culture. We're disciples of a vision that doesn't look like the kingdom, which honors the original design in every unique person,
Yes.
but also is an expression of Jesus
Come on.
at the same time. So that's the dynamic of even of Jesus being God in flesh, right?
Yeah.
So he was fully God, but fully
God,
man.
fully human. Yeah.
So it was this unique expression that we get insight into the heart of God through the person of Jesus, which is absolutely incredible. Anyway, mind-boggling, but different conversation for different way. but I think that's the thing. It's like it's asking these questions and
that need to be asked.
and having the conversations without being critical,
Yes.
so that we can come up with a response,
Yes.
not a reaction.
Yeah.
There's too many reactions, and our
Yes.
reactions push people further away.
So true.
And
Big-
even,
and there's no response to validate those reactions anyway. So it's just
dude, 100%. And some of the stuff, I mean, like I've obviously spent a lot of time, probably too much time, copious amounts of time looking at these guys who are deconstructing very publicly. Okay?
yes.
Now, like, how you frame this word is so important.
Yes.
The people that are triggered by deconstruction are triggered because they've made it political, especially in Western cultures and societies.
Yeah.
And all it does is it becomes another polarizing element that divides the church.
Yes.
Yay, guys, well done.
Oh my word, it's so true.
So the thing is, we need to look for less things to be divided on
Yeah.
and more to be unified on.
Absolutely.
And I think we can all agree that Jesus is probably the key there.
No, that's good. And I love what you're saying, because I think a lot of the times people hear specific triggering words, and instead of getting down to the truth of the intention behind specific words being chosen within certain forms of conversation, or even just a podcast, for instance, the easier thing is to shut off, not listen, assume the entire content that could ever be driven from that place, and put our heads in the ground and like an ostrich and just not want to hear it. And it's
100%.
like, and it's kind of interesting, because I think for me it like reveals where we are in terms of humanity, where there's such a hunger for truth, but an unwillingness to find it in places we wouldn't think we would find it.
Totally.
And so in a way, the trigger is a good way to open the eyes of those who are kind of those people who are just trolls. They want all the drama, all the nonstop. They want to create havoc. They're happy to like slander with their fingers, but say nothing in person. Those type of people.
Yeah.
And what I'm super excited about is that even in you saying, ultimately, the reason, one of the many, because like you said, you've pondered on it for a long time, and it's so exciting that it feels like I don't know, like a child, like entering the world, it's like this cool. I'm not a parent, so you can elaborate on that more, but but for me it's like the birth of something new. And for something to thrive after birth, it has to be healthy, and I don't see this being a response, to make it very clear for anyone listening, it's not out of bitterness. It's completely for the health of the local church in pursuit of who Jesus is.
100%.
And that's what I think a lot of people might misconceive off the bat. So they might, well, why are you deconstructing? And all I can say is it aligns with that video that you shared with us in one of your preachers at church, which was the building that was completely deconstructed in a massive urban area, but reconstructed with better structure and better foundation. I don't know about the foundation.
Yeah, the foundation was the same.
Yes,
so
there we go.
That's the same foundation.
There we go.
So I think that's also the principle, is that, and we see this in Ephesians 2. So insight into the foundation that has been laid for the church through through the prophets and apostles, right?
Yes, yes.
And I think the thing is, this conversation takes on a whole nother like dynamic when you have people within church and ministry who still love the church, who still follow Jesus, who still believe that the church really is the hope of the world. All of those great things that sound great, roll off the tongue nicely. Saying, guys, this is where I think we can do this better.
Come on.
Because there's no sense of closure for the people that are going through this and are legitimately before God saying, Lord, everything I've subscribed to, I don't know where it how this lines up for me. Because you know, the truth is, it's like when it comes to deconstruction, is you have two things like at play here, right? So the response is either none of this is real.
Yes.
Because what I have been taught in church, in the concepts, the principles, there's no appropriate like practice for me to contextualize it to my reality in life. And so, for example, like the prosperity gospel, or the, like certain teachings on healing and sickness and all of those things, where people are taught things and then it's not their reality. Now they look at it and say, well, I thought this was who God was. I thought this was the way it was meant to be, but this is not what I'm experiencing. So I have to come to one of two conclusions. Either all of this is nonsense. And there is no God. The Jesus didn't happen. Okay. The church has no function or value to add to society. Or it is real, but I've been given an incorrect theology. That I need to take down so that I can build on a foundation 100%. That's solid. So that's the picture there, is that this building is great, but then it gets taken down. They clean the foundation, and then they start to build this building that's so much greater than the building that was on there before. But it starts with this process of systematically taking it apart. And that's where we have to frame deconstruction in a way that can serve people well.
Nailed it on the head as well. It's a service. It's not for 100%. The fame, not for the influence. 100%. It's purely for serving the local church.
Because I believe that people. But I believe that that's what it's almost like people need to go through that process so that there can be a restoration in terms of discipleship, like we spoke about, but also being able to relate to and find your place in the body of Christ. To know that you're doing it not because you're motivated by a teaching centered around an organizational structure.
Or person,
exactly. But the kingdom, and God's design for your life.
So it's the rebuilding, not even just for the sake of the building, but it is a result of following God.
That's it.
Which is His heart. So it's like the building isn't even our intention; it's His intention.
100%.
Which is so cool because I'm thinking of all the critics from the sideline. They can criticize from afar, but I have to say I really admire the fact that you're doing this because you are a builder from within the building already. You know, it's easy to say what should happen when you're not in it, but when you're in it, it's actually again, like one of my favorite sayings, it's like it may have not been your fault, but now it's your responsibility.
Totally.
And I'm super excited for what people are going to hear. Obviously release dates will be made known in the future, but for now, guys, we can't wait. And for anyone who's watching, like, I really recommend go listen. You're going to want to listen. I've heard snippets of it in private, and all I can say is watch out, world, because it's going to be really, really good. And
thanks, Steve.
And I mean, Jesus impacted the world through 12 people.
100%.
so
100%.
And now there's like almost 2 point whatever billion, or I don't know the exact stats. You know, maybe
it's like, I think what global population?
No, Christians.
Oh yes, yeah.
But
it's incredible.
It's amazing. But as we come to an end, what is maybe a scripture or a quote that has really impacted you in this season? And for those who aren't aware, you are heading overseas. Lyle's heading over to the UK very shortly.
For a season, man.
But in this moment right now, what do you feel like God's saying to you? And what's a quote that's helped you?
So I think a scripture, so I would say John 2 and 3 speaks about, Jesus cleansing the temple. There's a lot in there, but not really too much time to unpack that. But and I would say a quote that's always stuck with me is this: evil triumphs when good men do nothing. And
Ooh, can you just say that again, just slowly, for all the preteens that are listening right now?
100%. So evil triumphs when good men do nothing.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, I can look for several reasons. You can look for several reasons that justify why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But one thing is for sure, it's like if you do nothing,
Then
things will not change. And I think
Oh.
that might be quite kind of like a poetic secular quote.
Yes.
But I do believe that's what God is doing and stirring amongst church.
It's what Jesus
and
did.
Believers. And the truth is, his biggest opposition was from the religious structures in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm fully aware that even in the spaces and places that we're stepping into, if we're to really be in tune with what Jesus is saying, especially his mandate on the church, it's going to ruffle some religious feathers.
Completely.
And we got to be okay with that.
Completely.
So,
But I mean, that is also one thing Jesus promises is persecution. And yet again, I remember hearing someone say, when your influence rises, so will your critics.
Yeah.
And if there's no persecution, are you truly sharing the gospel? Because Jesus was loved by his disciples and hated by the Pharisees.
Sure, 100%.
And the Pharisees started off as those who were closer in proximity.
Yeah.
Which ties into everything that you've shared with us today. So I'm going to bring it to an end. I'm not going to share from my end because I think that's just such a powerful... actually, I will share one. I can't remember the exact reference. I think it's also 1 John. But I was reading it, and it basically was talking about obedience.
Yeah.
And I think it's in chapter 2. And in the translation I was reading, it said, when you obey me, my love is perfected from within you. And that's just like...
so good, man.
Like really hit me so hard, because what are the things that God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit's asking me to do? And it could even just be in the context of this podcast. Like, who are the people he's asking me to bring onto this podcast to share his life, his light, that I might be apprehensive towards? And he's like, but when you do that, watch what happens, which is, again, it's like denying my flesh of how I think it should go and say, okay, Holy Spirit, like, this is your space and place. And ironically, not ironically, the funny thing is the slogan is like, here to grow, here to share. And you don't grow if you're not in uncomfortable situations where you're not confronted with things that challenge your current set of beliefs and all of that. So
totally, man.
Yeah, but all in all, Lyle, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on. Thank you for just sharing your heart. And it's so real. It's not something you're saying from an intellectual headspace. As someone who's had the privilege of hearing you preach and teach for different years, we were going to make a reference to it, but we're in the very room that Lyle preached in back in 2012 at a Pure campaign that we did, and he spoke about the process of gold being refined, and it's always stuck with me, funnily enough, when I was typing out, kind of like prepping for this podcast, and I thought, whoa, that's crazy. Who would have thought we're doing like a pod with Lyle, who was my leader, still is my leader, but now it's like over a decade later. Like, it's kind of crazy how God's just completely brought it together. So
awesome, man.
I don't mean to go too long, but thank you for coming on, and I can't wait to see what God does in your pod. And from all of us, I know Hayden as well, like we're backing you while you're in the UK.
Thanks,
and
man.
It's super exciting.
Well, Steve, thank you, bro. It's been an absolute privilege and honor, and I know that you're going to continue to inspire and encourage many people. So I mean that. I think last couple of weeks, even in terms of my podcast, I'm learning so much from you, and I think that's also health. Is like, man, there may be certain elements and things that you've learned from me and other leaders.
100%.
But the truth is that you're teaching and demonstrating something that we can all learn from too.
Thank
I
you.
love Paul's encouragement to Timothy. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but in everything, the seasons of life, be an example in love and speech and all those things. He uses 4 or 5. But the reason he refers to setting an example, and he does mention the aspect of his age, is because setting an example is not age dependent. You can set an example for people who are much older than you.
Come on.
and much younger. And then
Sure.
that again is a principle
Wow.
and an aspect that I think Jesus is dismantling, that we can learn from everyone.
So powerful. Takes away excuses, there's no excuse.
Yeah.
No excuse. I'm going to stop because I would carry on. But thank you so much yet again. Guys, thank you for
Cool.
coming and listening. I hope you enjoyed episode 1 of season 2.
Let's
You're the first
go.
official guest
Come
to
on.
come on to
What a
season 2.
privilege,
So
man.
thank you, bro. Appreciate it.
Cool.
And yeah, we wish you all the best. Thank you, Hayden, for doing
Cool.
everything behind the scenes. And we'll see
Fantastic.
you guys in the next one. Peace
Let's
out.
go.